Welcome back to Noah, the man, the ark, the flood. When we last left Noah, the ark had come to rest on the mountains of Ararat in the 7th month of his 600th year. In the 10th month, the nearby mountaintops were seen. Genesis 8 continues, and Noah is still waiting in the ark. In the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked. And behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh." Think about this global flood and what it would have done to the surface of the earth. Canyons and new mountain ranges were formed, not over tens of millions of years, but in weeks, months, or years.
At Mount St. Helens, what we observed, what happened, it was like a natural laboratory. In one afternoon in 1982, a whole canyon system, 1/40th the scale of the Grand Canyon itself, was formed. Mud flows came out of the crater because of steam mixing in with volcanic ash, and it came racing down the side of the mountain, and it carved its way into hundreds of feet of sediments that had been previously deposited from earlier eruptions. And geologists going back there later could see this little streams trickling down the center, these 100-foot high cliffs. Their normal experience, or their normal way of viewing those things, would have taken that little stream thousands and thousands of years to erode that valley. But it was observed to happen in one afternoon. And that's why we believe that the Grand Canyon itself was carved out by retreating floodwaters.
There's another strange feature in geology. Mountains all around the world are folded and bent. You ever tried to bend a rock?
So if you go into the Appalachians, you'll find rock layers that are bent like that, with fossils in them. We see the same in the Grand Canyon. The two situations are comparable. The geologists say the layers took slowly, gradually over millions of years, layer upon layer with the fossils in them, and then the folding took place afterwards. The problem with that scenario is that in all those tens of millions to hundreds of millions of years where the layers were accumulating, the bottom layers would start to get hard like concrete. So how could it be that tens to hundreds of millions of years later, the rock layers can be bent smoothly without fracturing as though they were all still soft? The answer is they were all still soft. There weren't the millions of years of layer upon layer upon layer. It was a rapid succession of layers with fossils being buried in sediments during the flood. Under the waters, they were still soft. Within a matter of weeks, the whole sequence is formed, and then it's bent by earth movements. And that explains the folding we see in the Grand Canyon, the folding we see in the Appalachians, where the layers have been bent without fracturing.
Have you ever been away for a long time from the town you grew up in? You go back and you find stores and malls and factories have sprouted up everywhere. The creek you used to play in is now invisible because it's an underground pipe. And maybe your house isn't even there anymore. Things change. But for Noah and his family, the change was total. There was no more old landmarks, no hometown to revisit. He probably had no idea where he was relative to where he lived before the flood. What was the first thing he did? Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, "I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." And then Noah and his family saw one of those things talked about by the writer of Hebrews, one of those events as yet unseen. God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. I will set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign for a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. In the suffering, death, and resurrection of his Son, Jesus Christ, God has established a new covenant, a promise to save all believers from the fiery destruction that will accompany Jesus' return to judge the living and the dead. Consider this passage, where Peter talks about Jesus' death and resurrection, the ark and Noah's great flood, and how it affects us today. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God. When God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, with angels, authorities, and powers having been subjected to him. Well, any questions? I'm sure there are. Biblical scholars have been studying Noah and the flood for lifetimes, and they keep studying. Secular scientists keep digging up fossils and saying they're hundreds of millions of years old. And children? Well, children keep running outside to see a rainbow. I want to leave you with this thought. Buddy Davis, a staff member at Answers in Genesis, wrote a song titled "The Wonder of the Rainbow." And there's this great line in the song that goes like this: "I've often wondered what Noah thought after the flood when he felt a raindrop." Something to think about next time it rains. I'm Kurt Klaus, and thank you for joining us.